Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm Roko Kruze, the head of solutions engineering here at Vectorized. Thank you so much for taking the time today. I'm joined by JB, or Jean-Baptiste, from Zenly, who leads up the head of infrastructure there. And he's so kindly taken the time today to talk to us about his experience in the streaming space and his experience with Redpanda. So welcome, JB.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Great. Thanks so much again for taking the time. So as just a way of introduction, can you take us through a little bit of, or just introduce yourself and talk a bit about your current role at Zenly and what you do there from on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, sure. So as you said, I am the head of infra at Zenly. Zenly, which is the subsidiary of Snapchat. So what's nice with Zenly is we are a small startup, basically within Snapchat. So it's super nice. That means we have the support of Snap, and we can do pretty much anything. And my role is basically to be one of the backend architect of the company, and plus I'm in charge of the team who is responsible for the entire production. So it's a big role, lots of work, and of course, lots of work with Kafka and Redpanda now. But yeah, this is what I do. I basically, if everything is going dark within it's probably my fault in the end.
Well, maybe not your fault, but you're going to probably be one of the people fixing it, I imagine, at the end of the day.
Yes,
so
most probably, yes.
You're going to be the one getting the call or the escalation. So we we thank you for that. You guys are the ones who keep the services running at night, which is not an easy job at all. So can you kind of talk about like how you got involved in distributed systems, streaming systems, and sort of where you got your start and what your experience has been such far?
Yeah, it's funny because I've started with distributed system as a junior. Basically, I joined a startup was called App Gratis. It was famous in the US at some point. It was a big application, and the goal of the application was to basically every day we had an application that usually you had to pay to get it, and this app was free for 24 hours, and it was a huge success, huge in the US and huge in Europe too. And in that company we had to track basically everything, because of course some of the application they had to pay us to be an App Gratis. So the introduction was that super fast growing company, and in the back end we were using Kafka plus Cassandra at the time, huge clusters. And to be honest, we started with Kafka without knowing anything about it, so we had to learn, and we had to learn fast. What was nice at that time is we had a great team. It was only a few people. Everyone was passionate. So we had to learn Kafka and Cassandra, etc. the hard way, with an insane traffic at the time. We had more traffic at App Gratis than the biggest website in Europe. So
wow.
I mean, only for a few people, and like for me as a junior, it was hard, like really hard. And it was almost 10 years ago now. So this is basically my introduction to distributed systems. So you go from school and you think you know everything, and then you discover what is reality. And reality with Kafka is kind of hard, if I may.
I could imagine. Well, in especially if this was 10 years ago, Kafka was definitely in its early stages at that point. So a number of the lessons hadn't really fully been learned at that point in time. There's still a lot of sort of understanding how the system worked and things from that standpoint. So did you guys, when you first deployed it, did you use the default settings and things from that perspective? And
yeah, it was like full default. Yep. We had no idea what to do. It was maybe not 10 years ago, maybe it was 8. But anyway, it was pretty young, and we had to read the code. I mean, the documentation at that time was pretty scarce. So it was just, and same for Cassandra. And it was like, okay, we had to dig, we have to dig the code, we have to read the code, we have to understand what's happening. That with the traffic we had. So that means we had no time to do it, but we had to. So it was not that much weekends at the time. We spent night working on it. It was cool because when you are a junior and you are introduced to big system like that, you are learning, and you are learning fast, which is nice. But 10 years after, maybe I'm not so inclined to learn everything the same way. I'm getting old, I guess.
Makes perfect sense. And what has been your experience so far at Zenly? So you kind of covered your early part of your career. I know you've been at Zenly for quite some time.
Yeah.
How has that sort of evolved with your time there?
Zenly for me is like a do-over of my previous experience. It was the same circumstances, new company growing fast, and the same backend. Zenly is, I mean, we are talking about streaming APIs and such. You have to imagine that Zenly is a streaming application. It's a streaming backend. The goal of Zenly is, on the backend side, most of it is to give you the location of your friends. So that means you do not want to wait for location. That means we have millions and millions of DAUs, and everyone wants to know the location of everyone in real time. That means we do not have caches, and we have to rely on huge distributed systems. So what was the evolution of Zenly? For the basics, almost none, because the basics is basically the same, except we have way more Kafka. We have ScyllaDB instead of Cassandra, but the backend is kind of the same. And I guess that is the issue, and that's why we are talking today, because yeah, 10 years ago and now the backend is the same. Maybe that's the problem.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point. Kafka, it was, we talk at Vectorized and Redpanda quite often that, Kafka came out of the MapReduce era, and was really kind of built around a time where, you were running on spinning disks, typically not using SSDs, things from that perspective, which, it's improved for sure over the years, but it wasn't really truly architected initially to be able to take full advantage of today's hardware, and nor would you expect it to be, just because of the nature of how systems have really changed. So
yeah,
that's a good point.
Like
so what? Oh, go ahead.
Yes, sorry, please go.
Oh no, go ahead. My apologies.
Yeah, no, I was saying, just imagine this system was designed like 10 years ago or something like that, and this ecosystem has not changed, but everything around it has changed. I mean, 6 years ago we had communities coming in, we had all those containers technology, and Kafka does not fit that ecosystem. And yeah, I guess we have to find a way at some point just to make it work, and make it work with Kafka. We did. We do have a Kafka in Kubernetes, auto scaled, auto everything, but it's like trying to make it work, but it's not designed for it. So it's too complicated and it's not working, basically. Yes, you can make it work, but I would not advise you to.
Absolutely. It was, you definitely look at the Kafka API, and it comes from and the protocol itself comes from an era where, there was a thought that you'd have access to every single machine, and you would know the DNS of every machine or the host name of every machine easily, and it would be exposed easily. But that doesn't really fit in with the Kubernetes model in any way, shape, or form. So, it always has kind of felt these types of protocols are, trying to put a square peg in a round hole to a certain extent, as they get moved into Kubernetes. So that makes a lot of sense. So what have you seen? You've already started talking about some of the challenges that you've seen with Kafka and streaming systems in general. What are some of the other ones that you've seen in your experience working with them over the years?
I guess what we just talked about. Kubernetes means we have lots of issue with high availability. I think this is one of the biggest one, because I mean we talked about it a lot, but Kafka is reliable. It's working most of the time. It's working. Even when you have lots and lots of traffic, it's working. But this is the kind of system where basically when everything goes dark and is not working, you have to spend hours and hours just to make it work and to have it back up, especially when you have lots and lots of data. This is one of my biggest pain points with Kafka. And I mean, it's linked with basically everything else. If you take the monitoring of Kafka, most of the people right now are using Prometheus. To monitor Kafka with Prometheus, you have to use basically two systems. The first one is going to be the JMX API. And if you have to use the JMX API in production with lots of traffic, you like take Zenly, for example, we have lots of topics and we have a heavy number of partitions. It's like more than 1K partition per topic. If you do that with JMX, that means at least for us, we had an overhead of more than 20% of CPU on every machine. And just for monitoring, that's insane. You cannot do that. You cannot dedicate that much CPU on a single machine just for monitoring. So I guess everyone else is doing something else. Like you have to consume a topic with metadata just to have some kind of monitoring at some point. And it's not reliable, it's not perfect. So challenges, I guess, monitoring, high availability, and just the money. This is the worst. Simplicity. If you have to use Kafka, I mean, lots of people who are going to listen to this, they know that to have a proper Kafka working, you need to have a perfectly configured client. You need to have the broker that needs to be configured to be in sync with your client with the same kind of parameters. And you have to do the same for the producer. So that means what? That means that you need to have engineers with lots of practice with Kafka, with knowledge of Kafka, deep knowledge. And you need those people to talk to each other. So that means you need developers, you need SREs, you need basically everyone to know about Kafka. That means you have to invest money. That means you're going to invest time. And that time, you're not going to use it, and you're not going to use a developer to build your company, to build a simple product, because you need to spend so much time on Kafka, because it's complicated. Yes, if you do know the ecosystem, Kafka is going to be great. Yes, except when it's not working, but it's going to be great. But you're gonna have to invest lots and lots of money. I'm not sure I want to do that anymore.
That makes perfect sense, and that's a great segue into talking about Redpanda itself, and it would be great if you could give us sort of an overview of what drew you to Redpanda initially, and how did you how did you come to be aware of it?
Like I said, we are using ScyllaDB, and it was maybe 4 years ago. I was doing a presentation at the Scilla Summit, and there was someone else doing a presentation, and it was Alex, the CEO of Vectorized. And I remember some guy was doing a presentation, and we were not really listening, sorry. And we were talking to each other, and it was like, okay, there's so need to move from Scilla to Kafka, or at least do the same that they did for Cassandra for Kafka. And he was doing presentation about what was the beginning of Redpanda. And we talked, and this is how basically I discovered what he was doing, what he was preparing at the time, because he was still working at his previous company. And we talked, and we had the same idea, like, we need to replace Kafka because it's way too difficult, and we have all this ecosystem right now that can drive us to a better Kafka, to a better way to do Kafka. And this is basically how I discovered Redpanda. It was not Redpanda at the time. It was just an idea, but it was fun.
No,
So
that's great. So you really wanted to see sort of the design principles that ScyllaDB and the C-star library, which is what Redpanda is built upon, the shared C-star library around scheduling and CPU utilization and such, and really just getting that applied to the Kafka space is what really kind of excited you. That makes perfect sense.
I mean, we had the experience with ScyllaDB where we went from a huge Cassandra cluster and just to a few nodes. And just imagine the same performance with Kafka. And with someone like Alex and the team he have now. I mean, you can do pretty much anything. So yes, this is the idea behind Redpanda from my point of view, at least.
That makes perfect sense. And so as we talk a little bit about Redpanda itself, it's one of the key things that we wanted to do as we built it was to make sure that it was fully Kafka API compatible, because our feeling really is that the Kafka API is great, and we just really want to make it better at the end of the day. How do we make it faster, more reliable, easier to use? How critical was it for you that Redpanda was fully Kafka API compatible?
It was not. It was not. In the end, of course it is, but maybe not for Zenly, but for most of the companies, this is going to be a game changer, because from what we did, we had no changes on the client side. So basically, we went from Kafka to Redpanda just by switching a DNS. That's it. I mean, I would love to tell you a big story on how we switch from Kafka to Redpanda, but there is nothing to tell. Just switch the DNS and it's working. That's it. That's just it. And it works better. It works with less machines. So is it critical? No. It's nice to have. But I do have to say that at some point, maybe I want a new client, because do we need this client? Yes, for companies who need to do the switch fast. But the Kafka client is old, and Redpanda is going to be the single interface for so much teams. I mean, from production engineer to data scientist to anyone. Because we have Redpanda, because it's fast. At some point, I do not want people to use the Kafka client because it's too complicated. Yes, it's great. Yes, but I don't want them to spend too much time trying to understand that. So
that makes sense. No, and that's a perfectly reasonable approach. And kind of what I'm hearing is that, you know, having the Kafka API compatibility was super or it was helpful in the sense of, you know, it lowered the barrier to migration. You know, I also imagine it also worked with other ecosystem tools that you had in place that supported the Kafka API. But from
yeah,
your viewpoint, it's not the most you know, it's really not the most optimal way for working with data today. You know, it was definitely state of the art previously, and a huge ecosystem evolved around it. But you know, we could definitely do better with today's technologies and things from that standpoint.
yeah, because I mean, we do have lots of protocol and RPCs that exist. Uh,
Mm,
like we can take gRPC. gRPC is working great. If you have gRPC, that means that you can generate clients in basically any language. So maybe at some point having a gRPC interface with Redpanda could be nice. I was talking with one of the SRE in my company, and we were working on a backup system for Cassandra and Scylla. And if you ever had to restore a backup from Scylla, it's a pain. It's super long, and having a queue in front of it could be nice, like Redpanda, for example.
mm,
Do I want this guy to learn the Kafka client and to learn everything with it just to do a backup system? Maybe not. Maybe if I just have a gRPC client, maybe it could be simpler. But, so yes, the barrier is low because uh, if you already have system using Kafka, it's great. But as much as Redpanda is going to be the only interface, I guess you want something simpler.
that makes perfect sense. Um, how has it been? What's your experience been so far with Redpanda? And you know, how has that you know, from the viewpoint of putting it into production, and then also you know, working with the team to get, you know, features and functionalities or issues resolved from your standpoint? How has that been so far?
It's been great because before moving to production, we've been using Redpanda for the past year, I guess. So it's been a long time compared to the lifetime of the company. But at first, of course, we had all the bugs. We had all the edge cases. We had everything. You can ask some guys at Vectorized about the disk on GCP. I guess this is one of the pain points they had to deal with. And that's because of us, because we do have a particular setup. Zenly is only using GCP, and GCP does have some issues with disk. That's it. That that has to be said
Yeah.
at some point. And what's funny is that we had the team on Vectorized solve the issue on their side, at least do something, fix it, and at the same time, they had to contact Google just to solve the issue on their side. And I mean, that's great. When you have a company like that involved in I guess, in your product, plus in their product, it's pretty much fun. It's fantastic because you have so much people that want to just to make it work. I guess the most common question I had for the last year was, okay, are we ready? What do we need to check? Do you need help? Can we schedule a meeting or a call just to make it work? And this is the kind of team we have in front of us. So it's been great. It's been absolutely perfect. I would love to have, I guess, so much company I work with to work like that. Plus, I mean, every single person in the company, they're all nice. So this is cool.
That's always good to hear. And no, thank you for that. No, and I do remember that Google disk issue where they weren't exposing the ability to, I believe it's the equivalent to like no barrier on ext4 file systems, but it's been deprecated on XFS file systems. So it was, it was understanding that this was an issue with the way in which they were exposing the underlying instant storage disks to the system. They were, they weren't allowing for the use of the cache, if I remember correctly. So, no, that was it was great working with you guys to resolve that. So, what are you looking forward to in Redpanda? There's, I mean, there's a lot that we're working on that's coming out here fairly soon. The WebAssembly engine, the HTTP proxy just came in recently. The ability to send data to S3 using shadow indexing is also something that's nearly or will be released here soon in the next couple of weeks. Of those things, are some of those features exciting to you, and are there things beyond that you see that are interesting? What's your viewpoint on that?
I guess we have two features that we know we need. I think the first one is going to be tiered storage, like S3 or DCS. This is game changer because I remember talking with you, I think, about the so many ways you can lose data with Kafka. And tiered storage is going to solve a good part of that. Because what do I want? I want to be able to access the data of my company for the past, I don't know, 5 years, 6 years. And the only way I'm going to be able to scale that kind of data and access it with the same interface I'm using every day is by tiered storage. Because, I mean, DCS and S3, they are able to scale. They can scale indefinitely or almost, and it's working. We cannot do that with disk. We cannot do that with anything. So tiered storage is going to be a game changer because we need it. Basically, we need it. And we need to have the same interface for any data, cold or not. So yeah, I mean, it's a backup of your company directly accessible. So this is the first feature we all need.
That makes, and just to kind of to touch upon that more, it's interesting to hear that that's really the first thing that's critical to you. But I think it's something that a lot of people struggle with is, how do you make sure that these systems can easily be restored if you do have a massive outage of some sort? And relying upon S3 and GCS. I mean, S3 is pretty amazing in its ability to do consistent writes and reads. So that's, I think having that type of setup is really important. And then in comparison to Kafka, where I think relying upon the page cache, and a lot of people have relied upon the page cache, but that does leave you open to larger amounts of data loss that can potentially happen in an environment. So it's interesting to hear you prioritize that as sort of the first interesting feature, but that makes sense. I mean, it provides better operational reliability for the system. So
yeah, and we were talking about restoring a backup from CLR. Just imagine any single event-driven system. Just having that. We had a case in Europe last week. Basically, we lost one of the biggest data center in Europe. I guess if people were using Kafka, if we had some people using Kafka in those data center, if they had the ability to save every single data to S3 with Kafka, I think you can with Confluent. But anyway, if they had the ability to do that, I guess it would have saved lots of websites in Europe these days because it was a big crash. So yes,
yeah.
this is for me. This is the most important. But we do have the web assembly VM, and this is not my priority because I'm not used to it with Kafka, but it
Mhm.
kind of opened a new, I guess, tons of new subject and new idea we can do with our queue system. Just imagine, we have at Zenly a big OLAP topic, which means we have every event of the company in one topic. This is great. This is cool because I mean you have only one place to have every event of the company. But that means that if you need to read only one type of event, you need to consume everything. If you have the WASM VM, you can just imagine detecting the type of event you are writing to Redpanda and just copy this event to another topic. This is game changer because this is a pattern we are seeing so much. Just you have to consume everything just to write to another topic. If we can delegate that to the system itself, that means we have lots and lots of CPU that are not going to be used anymore. That means we do not have to maintain the system doing that. So this is at Zenly, I think we are shutting down maybe 20% of the production right now if we do that.
That's
That's
fantastic.
yeah, that's huge. And this is only one usage.
Yep.
So
Because you would see something like that, like the system you're kind of explaining, you're sort of doing, you're ping ponging the data around without something like that in place today, right? Like because you would have to have the data come into Redpanda or into Kafka, and then another system might have to pull it out and determine what to do with the data, and then push it back into another topic for another downstream system to consume it. And at that point, you've now copied the data across multiple times. You've pushed it from one system to another system. And there's a lot of data transfer and network throughput that has to go into place to make that work. So just simplifying that, I imagine, simplifies the architecture, and also, reducing that amount of data transfer across the environment is going to be beneficial too longer term for you guys as
yeah,
well.
and if the system consuming is down, let's take, for example, GDPR. GDPR, it's a common law in Europe. It's a privacy law. Uh, that means that the data we are writing to our systems needs to be privacy perfect. And this is a big subject. Like for Snapchat and for Zenly, this is the main subject. Like with the data we have to be perfect by the law. So if you write some kind of data and you have to consume it to be sure that the GDPR is going to be perfect, that means the topic that you are writing to, you cannot keep the data for long because the data is not perfect yet. If the system reading the data just gets shut down for maybe, for us, it's like 30 minutes, that means that we are going to lose data. With the WASM VM, if you can do the GDPR side of data directly in Redpanda, that means you cannot lose data. And you are never writing any critical data that needs to be I'm losing my word, that that you need to transform to be GDPR compliant. So this is huge. That means never losing data. And that's what you can do with the WASM VM. So this is only one use case. I mean, we've talked about two use cases, but this is only a few. What can we do with it? We are not used to be able to do that. What can we do with it?
Yep. No, that makes sense. It's sort of a new, it's not a completely new paradigm per se, as like systems like Pulsar have had stream functions and other things in that regard. But I do think that the fact that we can do this in a highly performant manner is what's really going to open up a number of different use cases, because there could even be potential to push data to downstream systems as well directly from the WASM processing engine, whereas previously you would have to use the Kafka API to pull data from a system, or have a Kafka API integration. This way it can become more of a push model versus a pull model for certain use cases. So that potentially could open up other usages as well inside the environment.
Yeah, and you mentioned performance. I'm not used to have a Kafka-like system with a very low tail latency. I mean, even that, what can I do with it? Because we are using basically two queue systems at Zenly. We are using NATs for real time because NATs is faster than Kafka, etc. And the paradigm are pretty different. But now that we have Redpanda, which is a fast system and like super fast, what can we do with it? I mean, maybe we can replace some other system that we are using with Redpanda. Again, with the same idea, one interface, lower the barrier for a newcomer in your company. Not that much system. This one is fast. This one is working. Yeah. Again, I think what I love about Redpanda is I'm going to win some money and some time, and just because it works. So
it makes perfect sense. And I imagine too, I mean, you're in a, Zenly is a mobile application that people are using, and we've all been there where we're using an application, we make a request, or we do something in the app, and if there is a massive delay in when we're working with the app, like it becomes a pretty poor user experience.
yeah.
I think Google is very famous to say that anything that takes more than 3 seconds, I think on their website was engagement drops by 50%. So I imagine that it's even more critical for a mobile app, because if the thing doesn't load, or if it doesn't come back in time, you're going to move on, or you're going to put your phone back in your pocket and continue doing other tasks around you. So I can only imagine how critical that having predictable latencies and predictable performance is for an app like Zenly.
Yeah, and it's even worse because on Google, if it's not working, yes, the engagement is dropping, but people are coming back. On a mobile
Yep.
application, if the app is not working, people are not coming back. It's like they just remember that this application was just not working. And this is even worse for us.
That's true. That's true. You don't have a lot of alternatives to Google today, but so you will come back to Google, but you might not come back to the mobile app. So
yeah,
that's a very good point.
There is so much application, and yeah. Like we said, latency. This is what we try to learn to newcomers at Zenly. This is the only thing that matters. Latency, always.
I could imagine, and our CEO has a great quote that he uses a number of times. Is latency is the sum of all your bad decisions, which definitely makes a lot of sense, right? Like if your queuing system is adding a couple of seconds of latency, or 500 milliseconds to upwards of a couple of seconds, then you can only be as good as the weakest part of the overall system itself. So it's interesting to hear how critical that is. And I imagine too, like this could be a way for you to simplify your environment in the future of, it's great that you have NATs as a streaming platform that's very high performant, but typically doesn't provide, doesn't actually materialize or persist the data normally. And so, but I could imagine that, having a system that could do both for you, where, you have a single API or a single system that can persist data quickly and still provide good performance, or still provide great performance, it's going to be an easier easier to manage and to operate and things from that perspective versus, now, having to have like a set of people that know how to run Nats and a set of people that know how to run Kafka, or having to have people know how to run both. It probably will hopefully simplify that into the future of being able to use a single system.
Yeah, and it's always the same. Less time for newcomers just to be able to work on the platform. And this
Yep.
is what you're looking for at some point, especially for small companies. You cannot recruit people that knows everything, and you don't have the time to teach them, sorry, everything you know. You just need to have the less time possible, the less entry point possible. And if you have one system, yes, it's better. That's what we are looking for and what we need. But moving NATs to Redpanda is going to be a challenge because so much of our system are designed around the subscription system of NATs. But again, we have Vectorized with us, so I guess at some point they are going to help us. You guys are going to help us, and we are going to find a way.
That makes sense. So final question as we're getting kind of close here to the end is, where do you see the future of streaming in general? Like, we've sort of talked about Redpanda and some of the features that are coming up there that are of interest and applicable to Zenly. From your past experience, where do you see, where do you see the whole streaming ecosystem going in the next 5 years, or what trends are you starting to see that are exciting you in the broader ecosystem?
This is a big question, and again, I'm not sure that I'm able to answer that because with startup, what we're seeing is more and more startup that I know are using systems from AWS or GCP, like built-in systems. It's like half of them. The other half is using Kafka. And I'm not seeing anything new, I guess. You talked about Pulsar. I do not know any company that I know, again, who is using Pulsar. No one. We've tried it at Zenly. It was way too complicated, but I guess the ecosystem today is just GCP AWS versus Kafka. So where is it going? Seriously, I don't know. I guess with the performance that we have with Redpanda and the features that are coming in, even I don't know what I'm gonna do with it. So where are we going? I don't know. I really don't know, but it's going to be a fun ride because we've been stuck with the same technology for the last 10 years. So yeah, it's gonna be fun, but I don't know where we're going. Seriously, I don't know.
No, and I think that's a fair response. I know you mentioned previously like gRPC clients. Also, as you mentioned, people are really want to consume things as a managed service. We're coming out with a cloud service at the end of this month, at the end of March, where people will be able to sign up for a Redpanda cluster that's managed by us as well. So we definitely see that people want to consume it that way, but they also still want to be able to run it locally within their environment or their dev environment, also do testing as well. So it seems like having that level of flexibility is important too.
Yeah, because it's really difficult to. I've tried to use the dev environment for, I think it was PubSub, I don't remember, but it's difficult. I mean, it's a pain if you are able to use the cloud. And like for Zenly, we cannot do that because we are crazy about privacy, etc. So we are not going to use a cloud system that going to have our data. But if I had to start a new company today with less critical data, if I had a way just to use a system like Redpanda and just point it to an address with a gRPC client, Yes, yeah. I mean, this is less time for me to handle the cluster or to handle everything. Yes, yes. So maybe the future is that, yes, just to consume services.
No, that makes perfect sense. Cool. Well,
The-
oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
no, yes. This is the same kind of things that Google is doing with GKE, their Kubernetes.
Mhm.
They've released the GKE Autopilot. It's like fully managed Kubernetes for you, if you're going even further than just GKE. So this is just yet another services that means that you have to spend less time doing it. So yes, maybe that's the future. Less SREs in company.
Yep. No, it makes sense, and we're definitely seeing that. The number of startups that are requesting the cloud or want to start with the cloud or a managed service is very high. And it makes complete sense when you're a company of just a handful of people. You know, the last thing you want to do is figure out how to enable Prometheus metrics and alert manager and things from that standpoint, versus actually writing writing the application or building the service that you're looking to build. So it makes perfect sense in that regard as a place to get started for people. But great. Well, thank you so much, JB, for taking the time today. I really appreciate it.
My
And
pleasure.
thank you for everyone for joining us. We'll go ahead and we'll post this up on the website so that people can listen to it after the fact. But thank you so much for taking the time, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Have a good day.